Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Grid Encore. We took the live off of Grid Live Encore because, let's face it, our coverage of these series really isn't live. I'm Ben Schneider alongside Brandon Crossland, as always. And we have a special guest tonight as well from the Racing Experts Grid Network. Guest contributor Jonathan Field is with us. Jonathan, how's it going? Great to have you.
Good to have you guys. I was all excited to come on after, what a weekend. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, certainly a lot to talk about, and good to see our leader, Joe Samaniego, in the chat here. Joe, get well soon. We know you had some surgery today, but we know you'll be back after a week of rest, and we're looking forward to holding down the fort here for you this week. And it all starts on the Encore show right now. Of course, we usually don't cover the Cup Series on this show, but I think after the finish that we got last night, especially Brandon, since you're not usually on our Grid Live programming on the weekends, we have to give you guys the opportunity to just react real quick to the finish, the closest finish in the history of the Cup Series, 1/1000th of a second between Kyle Larson and Chris Buescher. And Jonathan, since you're our guest tonight, I'll let you go first. What was your reaction to seeing that finish live? Kyle Larson just getting the edge at Kansas Speedway last night.
Well, I thought Buescher got the edge when I first saw it. It was just one of those finishes where you just couldn't tell who won. I mean, even like when you got the close-up shot, you could kind of see it one way, it was Buescher, maybe one way it was Larson, but then they went to that more detailed camera look, and I mean, it was Kyle Larson. I mean, what a race, like from top to bottom. Just, stage one, that great battle. Stage three had some really interesting strategies involved. Stage two was entertaining as well. Just, I mean, what more could you ask for, really?
Yeah, first of all, Jonathan, just want to thank you for joining Grid Encore tonight. We do love our guests, Ben and I. So thanks for coming into our side of the place here on Monday nights. Yeah, I saw it the same as you. Chris Buescher looked like he had the edge there from the broadcast camera, but as it went along though, and they get that official Kentucky Derby style, isn't it fitting the same weekend as the by a nose and a nose at the 150th Kentucky Derby, that we get another horse race of our own here at Kansas Speedway, and just by just 0.001 seconds, Buescher is just astounded as he let Kyle Larson go around on the outside. And I hope Joseph Newgarden and company are taking a look at that and realizing that he's not a guy you want to let on the outside come the end of May.
Yeah, even at Indy, it's going to be tough.
Well, I saw our friend Alex, who was at the race last night, actually tweeted that Kyle Larson beat the car number that he will be driving later this month at the Indianapolis 500. So wouldn't it be something if he can take the number 17 to victory lane at IMS here in just a few weeks' time? But maybe a little bit of foreshadowing for the 500 later this month. But I'm in complete agreement with both of you guys. I mean, I just absolutely continue to be amazed. I caught some of Dave Moody's Sirius XM Speedway show on my drive home this evening, and he was talking about how, it's easy to get greedy when we're in a situation like this. We've been so spoiled with photo finishes, 2 of the 4 closest in the history of the Cup Series, and then a finish in Xfinity, but tied the old record, 2/1000ths of a second with Sam Mayer and Ryan Sieg last month. And, just to get all of those in such a close time span here to start out 2024, it's really remarkable. And we've been truly spoiled, I think, with a number of great finishes that we've seen here.
Yeah, especially when you consider, the Cup Series didn't really have too many photo finishes prior to this year. I mean, it was kind of sparse, and then we go out and get 2 of the closest, in history. It's really been interesting.
Yeah, criticize what you will about the new generations of car after car, but there's something about this one that I'm not sure what the secret sauce is, but coming to places like this, it seems to have the excitement factor, at least for going to Atlanta and breaking the record, and then coming here and breaking it yet again. There's just something wildly different about this year with this Gen 7 car, the next gen. I know it's already had a couple of years to iron out some kinks, but this seems to be where it's starting to, at least for some people's opinion, starting to hit a really high note.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I just think back to when Kyle Larson was talking about how, with the 670 horsepower and the 4-inch spoiler, you get looser when you're out in front. And it must be just creating that racing that just draws them back. It's really interesting.
Now, well, good point from Joe here in the chat. Ford ended up being on the losing end of all these photo finishes here in second place, and at the 2003 race at Darlington, where Ricky Craven beat Kurt Busch. So speaking of Darlington, we're coming back to that track this weekend. What do you guys think the chances are that we see a finish similar to 21 years ago with Craven and Busch coming to the line?
I feel like it's not as likely at a place like Darlington. I think the old lady in black still has her charm, and she still knows how to keep the drivers in single file lines and dealing with more with the track than they are with each other. I think it's still going to be a game of cat and mouse and by seconds, kind of more of what we saw at Dover, but with that extra Darlington touch. But I would love to be proven wrong and see some beating and banging there at the line. You got to know those official NASCAR cameras. They're going to be extra tuned and ready for whatever else comes this season, especially at a place like Darlington.
Yeah, I do not doubt anything, especially with how the Xfinity Series has run there. Just some of the wild finishes they had. I mean, last year with Larson and John Hunter Nemechek, and yeah, I do not doubt anything. I mean, that's why fans continue to watch NASCAR every single week. You just don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, Ben, you mentioned in the chat yet another NASCAR can't miss this year. Yet another NASCAR win compared to. In light of everything else in 2024 in the motorsports landscape, NASCAR just is getting their way with it, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's unfortunate. We've talked on this show a little bit. We've talked certainly on Grid Tonight, but IndyCar, a lot of things on the business side not going so well with TV ratings, and there are potential charter negotiations and Honda, questions up in the air about their future. Who knows what's going to happen? As good as the racing is, not as many people are tuning into it. And then obviously Formula One's just kind of been the Max Verstappen show over the last couple of years now. Although credit where it's due, we did get a great race in Miami yesterday with Lando Norris finally taking his first win. I have to tell you guys, I think I have to self-impose a ban on watching any more F1 races this year, because the two races I haven't watched a single lap of have been the two races that have been non-Max Verstappen Red Bull victories here. So I guess I'm just the bad luck charm or the good luck charm if you're a Max Verstappen fan. But I think for all of us neutral fans here, we certainly want to see a little bit more parity on the top step of that podium. So credit where it's due to McLaren and Lando yesterday. But in terms of the on-track product and the excitement and the number of things we've had to talk about, I think, like I said in the chat, NASCAR is undefeated this year. There's been so many good storylines and so much positive momentum this year, and this was certainly no exception here.
You mentioned SiriusXM. Jack Arute actually got to fill in for Dave Moody last week, actually before this Kansas weekend, and a caller called up and asked him about the issues with Ford and was really concerned, like when do you personally hit the panic button for no wins in the top three series so far this year? And Jack was really optimistic about it. He was like, I would pump the brakes. I would wait till Memorial Day weekend. I would wait till the Coke 600. I was like, really? Because on my personal panic button for Ford Motor Company, it's already been a couple of weeks ago. I've already been really antsy about that and thinking, all right, this not even Cole Custer in the Xfinity Series. Like, what's going on? Why can they not get this done?
Yeah, which is wild to consider because, Ford won all three championships last year. Ben Rhodes, of course, and, Cole Custer and Brian Blaney. So, I mean, to go winless through first 12 weeks, it's bizarre.
Well, Brandon, let me ask you this. Let's say, as Joe mentioned in the chat here, Ford being on the losing end of all these photo finishes, if you give them, I guess, just 1/100th of a second and spread out the thousands where you need to with how close these finishes have been, if you give Ford these three wins here, Ryan Blaney, Ryan Sieg, and Chris Buescher, are you still hitting the panic button on their season, or is it just a matter that we've made it to May now and they still have the goose egg, and regardless of circumstance, you can't look at that as a good thing and you need to kind of reevaluate where you are?
Look, winning heals all wounds. If I didn't see goose eggs in the column, I think I'd feel a lot better about them. And yes, they might still be the weakest link, but they wouldn't be like panic button level weak link. I mean, every year we're always going to have that parity. There's always going to be the weakest manufacturer and the strongest. It just happens to be Chevrolet and Toyota a lot more than we're used to so far this year.
Yeah. I mean, winning, like you said, it heals all wounds. And this is such a momentum based sport. We saw last year with how Alex Bowman, he was the top driver and then he had his injury and then he just came back and he wasn't on form. I have to imagine if someone like Ryan Blaney had gotten the win at Atlanta so early in the season, it might have been a chance for, them to go out and start finding something and, to be able to go out and find something, and maybe they might be developing better now instead of just try to get a win. Yeah,
I agree. But I like I said on the wrap-up show last night, I don't think this is a Toyota 2007 situation where, you're looking at this and thinking these guys have no chance to win. And obviously that was very different because that was Toyota's first year in the Cup Series. But, I think Ford is there in terms of speed. It's just going to be a matter of closing the deal. And Chris Buescher, again, the timing and scoring right away, like you mentioned, Jonathan, we all thought it was Buescher at the line there. That's how close it was. So I think when you're running this strong, and his car owner and teammate Brad Keselowski's had a couple of close calls this year. Penske obviously is still very strong. They're coming off of winning the last 2 Cup Series championships. I think it's only a matter of time before they break through. But every week that does go by, you got to imagine, to your point, Brandon, they're starting to get a little more tense in the Ford camp, wondering when it's finally going to happen here.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, only 3 blue ovals in the top 10 at Kansas after all that scrap. And I was surprised of how well Michael McDowell and teammate 38,
Todd Gilliland.
Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were kind of working that RFK side kind of duo where we've said in weeks past on this show when we do mention the Cup Series about RFK, when they are up in the front of the field, they tend to be together. And I wonder if that's a trend that goes across Ford, because there you see Michael McDowell and Gilliland doing the same. They were having a really good run there towards the end. Just a wild weekend on all fronts.
Yeah, I remember at Texas too that McDowell and Gilliland were running about 5th or 6th or so with that similar strategy. I mean, they got to figure it out with that. But yeah, just need that little spice to get them to the finish line first.
Let me ask you guys one more question, Brandon. I'll go to you first, then we'll move into the series that's part of a regular lineup here on the Encore show. There's been some talk about how great the racing was, obviously, and how the last several years at Phoenix, it hasn't been so great in the eyes of a lot of fans. Some people are floating Kansas out as a potential championship weekend race. Do you think that would work, or do you think that when you consider the schedule being the first week in November and the location of the racetrack, maybe the weather wouldn't be so cooperative there? What's your take on that?
That's still a pass for me. I've never been to Kansas Speedway, but I do know what weather patterns are, and it's the same reason we can't go to Pocono in February. The same reason we can't go any of those places on those odd times of year. It's because the weather is pretty atrocious for trying to do sporting events outdoors. Just ask the Kansas City Chiefs. I would much rather get away. I would much rather get away from Phoenix, but I don't think Kansas is the place to do it. But what's the answer to that? I don't know. One day they'll move from Phoenix eventually. Where they go, it's really just up to where the money is and where they think it's most profitable. Kansas is putting on some really good races, but the trend just is always moving, isn't it? Like as soon as we see some positive momentum somewhere, we say, "Oh, have all the races there. Let's have the championship there." We've lived long enough to see these patterns come and go, and I'm just not gonna try not to fall for it anymore. Like, if a track sucks for a few years, have some patience, because in 5 more years it's gonna be the bee's knees, and we're gonna enjoy the heck out of it. I'm looking forward to the day when we can enjoy short tracks again. It's coming, but then one of the other types of tracks is going to suffer. That's just the way it goes.
Think about the fall 2020 Kansas reaction and what we've got now. That's exactly your point, Brandon. 4 or 5 years.
Guilty. I was one of those. Yep. I mean, we all were. I mean,
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, you said enjoy it, or they turn into a short track, Auto Club Speedway. I just had to throw that in there. Well, speaking of fall 2020 Kansas Speedway, I remember being there in the press box and sitting like near the glass and like even a row up from the glass, and it was freezing cold. It can get really cold there. We should absolutely not have the championship race there. Tenants would not do well. The whole element to that would not do well. It's too bad because I think Kansas would be a great championship race, but there's Charlotte out there that it usually gets pretty solid weather around late October, early November. Of course, we have Homestead that everybody's always clamoring for the championship race again. Those are two great tracks. And even if NASCAR maybe want to work out a deal with SMI where, this is kind of speculating, throwing things out there, fantasy, whatever, rotate the championship race between like a Las Vegas and a Homestead, where they swap it back and forth, something like that. But yeah, the Kansas, you saw me move a little bit when you brought up that proposition. That was me remembering shivers from that race.
Yeah, and then you factor in it would be even about a month later if you put it at that point in the schedule of the finale. So, or I guess the alternative would be you shorten the season a little bit and maybe you could have an October finale then, but I don't think that's necessarily in the cards either. Adam has sorry, Brandon, go ahead.
Sorry, it says something. I think back to NASCAR Racing 2002 season or something like that. It says something whenever the main weather setting for Kansas Speedway is overcast.
Yeah,
I think I remember that being the case.
Yeah, well, Adam has a popular solution here. Just go back to Homestead. I know that was a popular finale track, and certainly now with how well the next gen seems to race on 1.5 miles, I'm sure it would be popular again. Joe Samaniego says he would want to see the All-Star race at Kansas, and then Adam responding, asking over North Wilkesboro. But I think this would be the counter to that, and I am in agreement with Joe here. North Wilkesboro, I'd like to see become a points race. I think certainly we'll see how the All-Star race does again this year, but the momentum based on the first year, I think, is there. And then, if that continues to hold, I see no reason why it couldn't be a points race myself.
Yeah, I think I need to accept the fact that Kansas isn't a little kid anymore. It's been around since 2001. He's a big boy now. He can do all-star races. That's my problem. I still have Kansas in the same Kansas and Chicagoland around the same time. I still have them in my head as baby tracks that don't need to have legacy events or are not capable of it or whatever. But I need to get that out of my head.
Yeah, well, it is remarkable, because you hear something like 2001, 2002, and you think, oh, it doesn't seem like it's that long ago. That was over 2 decades ago at this point. So
yeah, thanks.
Certainly they've been around long enough, I think, that, maybe it's worth considering.
Yeah, sure.
For sure.
All right, well, we're going to move on here in just a moment. But first, as always, the finish was so good, I wanted to just jump right in. I forgot to give a shout out to our Patreon supporters, as we always do here on this show. So first and foremost, want to thank, as always, Colin Michelle, Mark Robin, David, and Matthew for your support. It's what allows us to continue to host these shows here and continue to grow this motorsports media outlet and get on site to the track on a more regular basis. We've had Jackson Lambros out at a couple of IndyCar races to start the year. I'll be joining Joe Samaniego at the very end of this month and the beginning of June at Portland. And then, Joe will be back in Portland multiple times throughout the rest of the year as well. And your support is what allows that to happen. So thank you so much to those 6 individuals. And if you want to join them, if you like what you see tonight, you can follow the link in the description box below to that, or to buy me a coffee if you'd rather make a one-time donation instead. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, we now have the super chats enabled as well. So that's another option for you. And if you can't contribute financially, we totally understand, but we still ask that you at least follow us on social media so that you can keep up with our programming. And if you're on YouTube, again, hit the bell icon as well when you subscribe so that you're notified every time we host a new show or upload a new video. Now, with that out of the way, before we move on to the truck series, there was another comment here from Adam, I think, in the chat. Let me see if I can find it here. We've got Darlington coming up this weekend. Do you guys have any favorite throwback schemes that you've seen unveiled so far that we'll be seeing here on track in just a few days' time?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Man, it's hard to beat Kyle Larson's throwback scheme in the Cup Series.
Yeah. That's definitely the one on my mind. I'm going to run through these if I can find them. No, they're nowhere to be found. Okay, well, yeah, so far all the Hendrick ones are just absolutely wonderful. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money on purchasing all of those in a set. So, which is exactly why they make these. They're wonderful. But yeah, that Terry Labonte scheme, just classic core memories of being a kid. And one of my first die casts that I could actually open the hood on, like a little 164. You could open the hood, and of course, I'd always take the tires off like an idiot and lose them forever. And my parents would get mad because like, where's the tires? Like, I want to take them off. I'm a pit guy, you know. But yeah, that's definitely takes the cake.
I did the same thing, sadly.
Yeah.
I've got a Vickers and Allmendinger 2007 Red Bull set that's just absolutely destroyed. And if I could go back in time and tell 7 or 8 year old me not to do that, because I'd be sitting on a couple $100 by now with what those go for in the eBay auctions, I would certainly go back in time in a heartbeat and do that. But yeah, certainly when you're a kid, you get a lot of enjoyment out of those. So I feel exactly the same way. But Terry Labonte's paint scheme, certainly one of those classic cars. And Jonathan took the words right out of my mouth. I think that is certainly not just for the three of us here. I think that's at the top of a lot of people's lists for all the throwbacks so far. And I know there's been a lot of talk. I think this is the 10th year that we've done this throwback weekend now. So some people think, we're kind of running out of schemes. I think Brandon Jones in the Xfinity Series, his junior motorsports scheme is a throwback to Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s 2018 Xfinity one-off, which just the fact that a 2018 scheme is considered a throwback at this point is maybe evidence that we're kind of running out of those Earnhardt throwbacks or whatever in many respects. But this was one that I don't think had been done quite as well as at least not quite as well as what Larson and the 5 teams doing this year. So good to see them continue to go all in and find a scheme that's popular with a lot of fans. And again, I'm sure we'll see plenty of those this weekend, but that's the one that stands out to me the most for sure.
I really enjoy this Xfinity throwback for Johnny Sauter and the tiger stripes and the yellow. Of course, yellow is I think out of business now. I think they were like one of like really old companies in America, and they were about to hit like the century mark or something crazy like that, and then just went out of business. But yeah, I remember going to qualifying at Darlington in 2003. We didn't actually stay for the race because we were just literally coming back from Myrtle Beach. And so that was one of my first experiences was seeing qualifying for the Winston Cup. Then I saw the Busch Series come out, and I saw that yellow car come out. So it's going to be cool seeing that at Darlington. And also one more would be for Josh Berry, and it's a callback to Rodney Childers' late model.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
From 98. And on that hood, it's got the newly acquired Greenville Pickens Speedway. I'm sorry, not Greenville. I'm sorry. I'm getting that mixed up with Bowman Gray. Forget it. But still, the fact that Greenville Pickens Speedway is on the hood of that car is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when Joe mentions in the chat here, Keselowski's theme going outside the NASCAR family a little bit for that one with Castrol, but I think certainly a solid pick there as well. It's got the whole list pulled up here. Again, Chase Elliott not going too far back with that Dale Jr. 2014 Daytona 500 scheme. Corey LaJoie's got a nice one, throwing it back to his own K&N Pro Series car from 2012. So, again, there's lots of great schemes to choose from, but I'll agree with Joe again. Keselowski's I like a lot, but I think Larson's is very hard to beat. So we'll see if there's any last minute reveals this weekend that might top it. But that's the number one for me for sure.
One more really good one for Daniel Dye doing the 1989 Kyle Petty peak scheme.
Yep.
It's pretty too.
That's a good one as well.
Brendan Poole's got a nice one with the Hot Wheels scheme too.
Always a classic.
Yeah.
All right, we move on now to the Truck Series race, and stop me if you've heard this before. Corey Heim going to victory lane here in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series at Kansas. Maybe not quite as much of a shock as we were with Kyle Busch a couple of weeks ago, Brandon, but I think nevertheless not a huge surprise here with how Corey Heim has been running. His worst finish of the year so far is only 10th place, so he is on a top 10 streak of his own, maybe similar to what AJ Allmendinger was doing in Xfinity a couple of years ago. But Jonathan, we'll start with you. Obviously, Corey Heim is subbed for Eric Jones in the Legacy Cup car the last couple of weeks. Do you view him as one of, if not the top prospects in NASCAR right now?
I would say so. I mean, just looking at the run that he had, how he drove all the way to 16th and the green flag run before the caution came out. I mean, didn't have the best overtime restart, but I mean, he was holding his own. Was probably going to finish 16th if not for spin on the final lap. So, I mean, just looking at like how good he is in the trucks, that's another factor of it too, because I think he has something like a 3.5 average finish, and in just like the last 2 years, he hasn't finished outside the top 10 in more than like 4 or 5 races. And so I think that he definitely has a pathway forward, especially with some of the things we've heard about the charters and everything, and a Legacy Motor Club may be onto something. I can't confirm nor deny any of that. That's just out there. But yeah, certainly. I think Corey Heim's got the talent. He's got the backing. He's got everything you need for a young driver to be successful.
Yeah, I'm absolutely not overlooking the fact that he's been filling in for Eric Jones and the apparent success he's been seeing there in that 43 car too. Didn't exactly finish as well as he was performing, but down in 22nd. But he had some high notes there in Kansas in the Cup car, and of course, just a stellar talent in the truck, and just can flow right past you and compete with the likes of Kyle Busch and beat them. That's just what we've been seeing from Corey Heim. He is definitely one of those talents that's going to be around for a long time, and very well one of the top prospects. I wouldn't say, maybe not the top prospect, but one of the top prospects.
You know, guys, I think it's no coincidence that you look at the top 2 finishers here in this truck race, and what do those guys have in common? They were both running the Cup Series race on Sunday. Obviously, Zane Smith with the Spire team, and Corey Heim getting the call up as the official reserve driver. I think that's important to note as well. You know, really no surprise that he was the one that Legacy called up to fill in for Eric Jones, because that was announced well before the injury happened at Talladega that Corey Heim would be taking part in Legacy's Cup program this year through that reserve driver role. And you always hope that your Cup debut comes under better circumstances, I think. But nonetheless, it's been an opportunity that Corey Heim's made the most of. Like you mentioned, Brandon, I think the finish doesn't reflect the opportunity that he had to score a slightly better result in the race yesterday in the Cup Series. But obviously, we know in the Truck Series, Corey Heim has been absolutely dominant. And again, you could make the argument in a full season points battle last year, probably should have won the championship, still had a good shot at it in the current playoff era. Unfortunately, had to deal with Carson Hocevar taking him out of contention late, but nonetheless, still had a fantastic season last year and is off to perhaps an even better start here in 2024. So we'll continue to follow that and report on his season and his championship fight here on the Encore show throughout the rest of the year. But again, Corey Heim making a strong case, like we mentioned, not just championship favorite in trucks this year, but somebody that I think you've got to watch out for in terms of someone who's going to be racing on Sundays on a more regular basis and not too distant future if he can keep this up.
Let's put it this way. His Cup debut car from Dover with the STP and all that, which is a cool way to start your Cup Series career, I think it's being put into diecast form. So he's pretty anticipated from a lot of folks.
Yeah, you got to hope that enough people pre-order it so that it actually gets made. But I think
there's the DMP possibility too. But.
Yeah, I think Lionel put that up for order. So if you're a Corey Heim fan, make sure that you go grab that, because if not enough people pre-order it, it's not going to get made. All right, well, let's go to the bottom end of the top 20 here. You see Cam Waters back in the Truck Series this weekend, down in 19th place. He had a spirited battle with Lane Riggs on the last lap that led to the two kind of coming together a little bit. It didn't total their trucks or anything. They still were able to cross the line in 18th and 19th there. But after the race, there was a bit of a conversation on pit road between those two drivers and a little bit of disagreement. So, Brandon, I know that when he made his debut at Martinsville a few weeks back, we thought that was going to be his welcome to NASCAR moment, making your NASCAR debut in a Truck Series race at Martinsville. But do you think getting involved in a little bit of an argument on pit road, that's more of a welcome to NASCAR moment for Cam Waters, the Supercars driver?
Yeah, I think that rips the Band-Aid off well enough, doesn't it? With Lane Riggs from South Boston, Virginia, and Cam Waters flying in. We've been waiting on this show, Jonathan, for Shane Van Gisbergen to have his welcome to NASCAR moment, and I've just been saying it's only a matter of time. We're counting down the weekends before it finally does happen. He's such a nice guy, though. He's always got a smiley on my face. I'm all good. I'm ready to go. But here comes Lane Riggs ready to set it straight with Cam Waters. Cam Waters, he came into that conversation just kind of like hand on shoulder, like, "Hey, buddy, hey, we're good. Let's talk this out." But Lane not so much. A little more disgruntled. And then a Thor Sport. I was telling Ben before the show, so you can see a ThorSport team, one of the team guys come over and start like, putting Cam out of the way. Like, I'll handle this. You're new here. I'll handle this. Hey, Lane, what are you doing? Like trying to like fend for the guy that's not from here. Yeah, I think that's a proper introduction, if anything.
Oh, absolutely. And honestly, I looked at that replay. I thought that was just good hard racing. Cam going for on the final lap, a close battle. It was just good hard racing. But I understand where Lane is coming from. This has not been, oh my gosh, this has not at all been the season he was anticipating, with just not having the performance. Like, I mean, he, as you can see there on the left, or when it flashes back over, that he finished 18th, in a truck that was vying for the win last year. I mean, and then also, I mean, just the wrecks, the mechanical issues, just it just has not been a good season. And then to get roughed up by a guy who is just, obviously he's not, but in his eyes, waltzing in from Australia and, kind of doing this, one-off race. I mean, I can understand why Lane was absolutely mad, but I honestly, from neutral view, I thought it was like just good hard racing. Welcome to NASCAR, Cam Waters. Welcome to NASCAR, Shane Van Gisbergen. I really thought that incident with Austin Hill was kind of his moment back at COTA. But yeah, glad Cam got his moment.
Yeah, well, Jonathan, to your point, and I know Brandon and I were talking about this backstage right before you logged on to the StreamYard here, but I think Lane Riggs came into the season with a lot of people anticipating that he'd be running significantly better than he has, especially given what Zane Smith was doing in that truck the last couple of years. And you look at his results from IRP the last couple of years when he made his debut with the Halmar Friesen team, a 7th place run there, 3rd in the Spire truck last year. So he's certainly got that track figured out. But overall, to start the season, only one top 10 through the first 8 races. It was a 10th place finish at Bristol, and he's 22nd in points right now. And just to put that into perspective, Caden Honeycutt, who you see had a nice run in 4th place this weekend, he's only done 4 of the 8 races so far, and he is 19th in points. So, to have a guy that's only run half the races that you have through 8 races in a year be 3 spots higher than you in the point standing is certainly a sign that Lane Riggs has some work to do to get that program turned around. There is still time before the Truck Series playoffs begin. We're halfway home in terms of where we are on the schedule right now to that. So, there are still some opportunities, but, it's got to happen sooner rather than later if you're Lane Riggs at this point.
Sure.
All right. We are going to move on now to the ARCA Menards Series, and Connor Zilich last week in the same car as Connor Mosack this week. Mosack took his 2nd career ARCA win, 2nd straight at Kansas, and the 2nd straight for PRG's number 28 car. Now, ironically, Mosack won this, not this race, but a race at Kansas last year in the fall in the ARCA Series, driving the Joe Gibbs Racing number 18. And that's the same car that he had to pass and then hold off for the win this weekend, being driven by Tanner Gray. So we'll bring Jonathan back in here now for some ARCA talk here. Jonathan, I think a lot of people viewed Tanner Gray as kind of a Max Verstappen in terms of how he was dominating this ARCA race here at the start in the first half of the race. And then after the race break, obviously the field got bunched up a little bit and Mosack was able to work his way around him. So how surprising was his win after how dominant Gray looked in the first half?
Yeah, it was very surprising. I thought Tanner Gray was going to easily claim the win, but I mean, just a great drive by Connor Mosack to get it there at the end. I think he just figured out like what he needed to do, and Tanner just, slipped. I mean, there was no 2 ways around it. And just a race that didn't have a whole lot of cautions to it. I think Connor was just able to figure it out and just to execute really well at the end, which I think is great for Connor because it shows that he can get the job done in multiple different vehicles. I know some people have been kind of wondering about his talent, his prospect level, but I think that win says a lot.
Yeah, well, again, I know obviously you're a guest tonight, Jonathan. We've had this discussion, Brandon and I have on the show before about, the fact that ARCA's car counts up until this year, I think they're starting to come back a little bit, but they have struggled at certain tracks that they've gone to. And, sometimes we make a joke that it's really the 18 and 20 series was how dominant that Gibbs car and the 20 from Venturini is. I think it's great to see PRG emerge here over the last couple of years and, getting the job done with multiple drivers, and Venturini bringing 5 cars to the track this year on most weekends, I think has helped quite a bit as well. A great run for Dean Thompson in third. Again, somebody else who I think, if he runs more of these ARCA races and continues to run like this, you got to think that he's going to break through for that win at some point. But, again, I think there was a lot of chatter on Twitter as well the first half of the race. People just saying, to have a cup program like Gibbs come in here to the ARCA series, and, it doesn't seem to matter who's in that car. Obviously, it was Ty Gibbs for a couple of years. William Sawalich has been running very well. Do you think it almost seems like an unfair advantage to have a program like that running against maybe not the Venturinis of the world, but some of your more independent ARCA teams that don't have that level of funding?
I would say yes to some extent, but I will play devil's advocate on this because you see a race like this where, the 28 car, the PRG car goes out there and gets it done at the end and beats, someone like Tanner Gray and the JGR car. I mean, that's a big statement for Mozak. I mean, it's definitely saying something for Tanner Gray, and it says something for any driver that goes in that car, like where they are at with their talent level, how they're able to execute, if they can close out a win, if they can get the job done, or if, someone else could win. It's just the competition level. Yes, there is a disparity there, but it's close enough to where I think it really puts these young Toyota prospects, their feet to the fire, so that way they're able to actually know what it's like to go out, have a dominating day, win, but also close out a win.
Yeah, well, and to that point, obviously, I think Tanner even mentioned this in his post-race interview. He's absolutely not satisfied with the result. When you get in that car, the expectation is that you will be competing for and winning ARCA races, and second place does not get the job done there. There's a lot of drivers on this leaderboard here that would be absolutely thrilled to have a second place finish in this series, but Tanner Gray being in that car this weekend is certainly not one of them. So, again, I totally see what you're saying there. I think, it can be a little bit of both. It is certainly a little bit of a disadvantage on paper for the rest of the ARCA field to be going up against a program like that. But at the same time, I think it does put these Toyota drivers that get in that car under a bit of a microscope here. And then if, somebody can beat them like Connor Mosak, being on both sides of that coin, getting a win in this car last year and now being part of a different program and taking the lead from that car and beating that car to win again this year, I think, certainly says a lot about him. And he had a solid run this weekend. We'll see if that leads to anything else for him the rest of the season or into 2025. Who knows? But, again, I think Tanner Gray certainly has some unfinished business here. And, again, we know William Sawalich isn't quite old enough to run the full schedule yet. I'm not sure how many more races Tanner's going to get in that car this season, but, he certainly has to be wanting to close the deal sooner than later here.
Certainly, yeah. And, yeah, we'll see who else is going to be in that car. I know like Carson Quaffle, I believe, has some more starts in the 28. Also, you got guys like, Luke Fenhouse who have run before with them, and also Connor Zilish, who we mentioned earlier. So there's a lot of exciting talent coming through that number 28 ride.
Yeah, and well, you bring up Carson Quaffle again. He was in the 82 last week in the ARCA and ARCA East combo race in Dover. The Connor Zilish won, and some news that I'll get to here in just a little bit with my one shining moment, but he's added onto his schedule this year, and I know we are certainly happy to see that given what he's been doing in the Junior Motorsports Xfinity car in just a couple of starts. So good to see that, and I think, again, that would be another great candidate for some more starts this year in the ARCA series for sure.
For sure.
All right, well, since we only have ARCA and trucks this weekend in the series that we regularly cover, we are going to take you through the modified results here real quick. The car known as Old Blue, I think some Tommy Baldwin racing fans in the Cup Series might remember that paint scheme that Steve Park drove a little more than a decade ago. That car, Old Blue, went back to victory lane this weekend with Jake Johnson. That's the first time that car has won in the modified tour since 2017. Jake Johnson taking the win in the Granite State Derby ahead of Austin Beers and Patrick Emmerling rounding out the top three. And for Johnson, this win moves him up to third in the points behind weekly contenders Ron Silk, you see in 10th place this weekend, and Justin Bonsignor in 6th. So the points battle heating up in the modified tour as well. And when we have the opportunities, we will continue to keep an eye on that here on Grid Encore throughout the rest of the 2024 season. That's almost going to wrap up the show for us here tonight. But as always, we have it's a little bit difficult to narrow it down to just one shining moment this weekend with how many great moments we have to choose from. Jonathan, I'll let you go first since you're our guest tonight. what stood out to you from this weekend in the world of motorsports?
So I'll go with two kind of underrated ones. Obviously, everybody's talking about some of the other shining moments that they're going to bring up, and I will not spoil. But the one shining moment for me was Noah Gragson, just being able to pull off points in each stage and not, stage points from a timely caution or on a drafting track, but just on his own accord and his own performance really breaking out this year. I'm really impressed with Noah Gragson, what he's doing. Plus, he executed well and got a top 10 finish. So that's number one. Number two, we saw him on this side of the screen. There we go. Caden Honeycutt getting a fourth place finish, challenging Corey Heim for the win. He mentioned in the post race that he probably would have challenged Corey a little closer after pit stops, but just it was one of the first ever green flag pit stops he ever made. To come out of it with a fourth place finish, though, especially in that Nice truck, which has had performance and run really well before, just a standout night. I personally will take the neutral hat off and just say that I think Caden Honeycutt absolutely deserves a full-time ride in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, and hopefully that comes soon.
Good stuff. Mine are pretty obvious, I guess. The NASCAR history being made yet again, the closest finish in history. I can't believe we got that at a place like Kansas Speedway, but kind of looking like the IRL days for IndyCar. Here we are getting these close finishes. And then also in Miami, well, Lando Norris got his first career victory. I know this is Fernando Alonso. I know he didn't make the Indy 500 that year. That's the whole joke, because it's the month of May. But yes, Lando Norris finally gets it done for McLaren and for himself. Well done, Mike.
Little Lando Norris.
Certainly long overdue there, and I think shining moment for almost everybody this weekend to see McLaren be able to break through finally for him and get that win. Certainly something special in Miami. Before I give mine, follow-up for you, Jonathan, from Joe in the chat. Briscoe said he wanted to be the team leader at SHR before the season started. Does how well Gregson's been running jeopardize that status? What do you think?
Ooh, that's a good question, Joe. I like
Spicy.
that is, yeah. I don't think so. I think Chase Briscoe's he has the experience being there. If anything, I kind of see it as like maybe a Joey and Brad situation where Briscoe and Gragson, they really work together. We heard about the study group that Ryan Preece apparently got left out of. So I really see that as like I feel like those two are going to be really strong leaders. I don't think it's one over the other.
Fair enough. I will give mine now. And again, like everybody else, I think it's got to be two shining moments this weekend here. The first is something I hinted at. Carson Kvapil picking up 6 more races. Was just announced that he'll be back in that junior motorsports car in the Xfinity Series for a few more this year. So good to see that. And I think if it goes like his first couple starts went, you might just see him pull into victory lane later this year. And I think, again, another driver that's certainly deserving of a full-time seat. It's just going to be a matter of funding and if there's a place for him at junior motorsports, or if a rival manufacturer might pick him up. I think his future is going to be very interesting, but he's certainly proving that he has the talent necessary to succeed in this sport. Another shining moment I want to give out is Amber Balkin. I know that she had a very hard hit at Dover last week, and there were some questions as to whether or not she was going to be medically cleared to even run this race. And not only did she end up running it without issues, she brought home another top 10 in that Venturini car. So again, I think slowly making progress in her career and her development for Venturini this year, running full time. And great to see her gut it out through the injury and come away with a solid run at Kansas Speedway this weekend. That's another shining moment for me, and that is going to be our show tonight. So thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to follow us on all our social media platforms here: X/Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, LinkedIn, Threads, most importantly, right here on YouTube. Thank you all again so much for helping us hit 1,000 subscribers a little more than a month ago. Here's to the next 1,000. Be sure to subscribe if you're not already. If you really liked what you saw tonight, again, like I mentioned at the top of the show, you can consider joining our Patreon. Join Colin Deschelle, Mark Robin, David, and Matthew in investing in Grid Network to help keep us on the air throughout 2024 and help us get to the racetrack on a more regular basis. That will only continue to help us expand our coverage for you, the viewers. If you'd rather make a one-time donation instead, you can visit the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description box below. You can buy a coffee for a specific on-air talent any amount will help us continue to grow our motorsports media outlet here. Or again, if you're watching on YouTube, we now have the super chats enabled as well. Now on Wednesday, as always, Kobe Lambeth will be back with our friend Josh Birch and Matt White on Grid Tonight. Women in Motorsports back this week as well. I'll be filling in as host for Joe, who's off this week. Hopefully Emily Sharp will be able to join us again. We've got a lot to recap with F1 Academy and a few female drivers in the ARCA race that I just mentioned as well, Amber Balkan being one of them. And of course, you can stay tuned for more Grid Live coverage this upcoming weekend with pre-race and wrap-up. And then we'll see you right here again in 7 days for another episode of Grid Encore. Brandon, Jonathan, any final thoughts before we sign off for the evening?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Darlington, track too tough to tame. The lady in black. Let's do this. I'm ready.
Yes, my thoughts exactly. I always point to the next weekend, and man, it's a great next weekend to come. There's just no other place like Darlington, and I'm so thankful that guy didn't want his pond, or he was so protective of his pond, because then we wouldn't have such a wonderful track. And I love Throwback Weekend. I love Darlington. Never change.
You know, you'll never say never, but I can't help but think about the fact that we're going to the track where we saw the previous record for the closest finish, and if we've just broken that, I think it would really be absolutely remarkable if we got it again. But who knows what we're going to see the way this season's been going. I think to your point earlier, Brandon, it's not a track that you would necessarily think of providing those close finishes. You might think of a mile and a half. It's a little bit wider, or certainly a super speedway, Talladega tying that record in 2011. But I'm certainly looking forward to seeing those throwback paint schemes again this weekend, and we'll see what kind of show a next-gen car can put on for us at Darlington and for the other series as well here. We've got another fan of Darlington and Joe Samaniego. And again, Joe, we're thinking about you, and can't wait to see you back on the air list once again in a week's time. Hope that your recovery goes well. We'll continue to hold down the fort for you in your absence here. So thank you for being active in the chat tonight. And thank you all for watching Grid Encore. For Brandon Crossland, for Jonathan Field, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you again. We will see you next week here for another episode.